Thanks for that, and thanks for having me on today, and hope everybody's doing well. As mentioned, we're speaking about software-defined storage. Really, we have a platform for this that's built out of our general hypervisor. So for anybody who is currently a vSphere customer, you're going to be very well adept or very ready, actually, to adopt this approach to software-defined storage instead of having to really invest in physical storage devices that are external to your vSphere hosts. And then just to make sure, did I get control yet? Let me see here. Yep, I did. Perfect. So our product that we have developed is, we call it Virtual SAN, or vSAN for short. And today we're just going to be doing a bit of an overview. As an agenda, I want to first start off with kind of what our ultimate vision is for all of our clients here at VMware, just where we see the industry going and where we think that clients can really get the most out of their investments in IT products and services. After that, we're going to talk about some of the pain points that a lot of organizations have that I've come in contact with, and then also that just VMware has come in contact with in general. Some of the pain points they have around a traditional storage architecture, whether that's a SAN or a NAS setup. And then from there, speak about our Virtual SAN product, how it addresses those pain points and actually improves what your overall storage really solution and, sorry, what's the word I'm looking for here? Yeah. Anyway, what your approach to storage is in general. So yeah. With that, we'll go ahead and get started here. And I know that at VMware we talk about software-defined everything quite a bit, and I don't think that's ever going to change. But recently, after speaking about the software-defined data center for quite a long time, we've actually adopted an approach now, and we've really filled out our portfolio to a point where we're now speaking about a software-defined enterprise. And really, the first thing to note with the software-defined enterprise is the fact that all of these services, all of these products, and these platforms that we have in place, they revolve around applications. These can be traditional, modern, or software-as-a-service applications. But either way, we recognize, and it's becoming more and more apparent in the industry that organizations rely on applications to be productive and to be profitable as an organization. So everything that we're doing here at VMware is to make applications more readily available, easier to manage, easier to provision, and accessible wherever end users or wherever organizations need to be. And traditionally, since the beginning of VMware, we first started this journey with what we call the server virtualization, or really compute abstraction, as we see here in the bottom left. And this is where we simply created a layer of abstraction between physical compute hardware and what was actually going on, and that brought about the advent of virtual machines, really. And from there, virtual machines being able to adopt server virtualization, invest in it, saved organizations a lot of money, both on capital expenditures but also operationally as well. We made applications and services much more readily available. They experienced more uptime, and currently, organizations are able to consolidate a lot compared to how a traditional approach looks to really to supporting a business with IT services. And that's where a lot of people think of us as just a compute virtualization, or really vSphere, our product line, as an organization or a company or a vendor that really only focuses on vSphere. But it's not really the case. We've actually grown our portfolio quite a bit over the last couple of years to include network virtualization now with a product that we call NSX, and what the focus is of today is storage virtualization with our Virtual SAN product. We feel that these on-premise services, being able to converge everything into your vSphere hosts, is really the best way to get the most out of your investments in these applications and these services. And all of these tools, all these services that you invest in, they're also available in a public or hybrid cloud setting, whether that's delivered through us or through some other cloud provider. We do feel that adopting a hybrid cloud strategy, where you have some of your applications, some of your services running on-premise, and some running in the cloud somewhere, we feel that that's really the optimal approach to how your organization should be functioning. And really, all of these products, they're great in and of themselves, but without proper management, it's tough to get a lot of value out of them. And so the last part of what we call the software-defined data center really is this idea of management, where we have policy-based management and automation, both on the cloud side, on the operation side, and on the business side. And so that's really just at a base level what we're looking at when we talk about the software-defined data center. All of these services that are now virtualized and controlled by software and can be easily moved into or extended into the cloud, and they're all easily managed through policy that is really centrally governed by IT. And the last piece of the software-defined enterprise, and we're not going to spend a lot of time speaking about it today, is end-user computing. Mobility is becoming more and more important, and we see that many organizations, as Larry actually mentioned, VDI is gaining quite a bit of traction. We also have solutions for virtual desktops, but then also for mobile device management. You know, how you deal with bring your own device initiatives, everything along that line. And so this slide as a whole, as we see here, is really what we're focusing on as as VMware is concerned, and we feel that adopting an approach that really is software-defined is the most effective way to do business and to run your IT services. And so, as mentioned already today, we are focusing on the topic of software-defined storage through our Virtual SAN product. So with that, we're going to speak about traditional storage, some of the pain points that many organizations run into. And the first thing that I really want to bring up is that in a lot of VMware vSphere environments that I run into when people are starting to experience issues with application performance or availability, is that storage really is the bottleneck that's controlling that, whether it's a lack of capacity, a lack of performance to support what a given virtual machine or application needs to do. It more likely than not is something being caused by the storage device that you have running there. And so really what we think is that with these issues that people have with storage devices, whether this is just inflexibility, lack of agility, getting involved with vendor lock-in, making it difficult to change, troubleshoot, is that you really do need a new approach to storage. And really some of the other things that it comes down to is that just about every hardware vendor, they have interoperability problems that can be tough to overcome. They require you to be locked into a single vendor, as mentioned. And then when you're talking about adopting a SAN, each SAN really does have limited support configurations. It's going to have its own storage array microcode. It'll have its own SAN switch firmware and host hardware and software. And there's a lot of different components that come into play that really make a traditional storage architecture extremely inflexible for organizations to adopt and invest in. And so from there, outside of just purchasing a SAN up front and starting to use it, is that when it comes time to upgrade or improve upon your storage performance or your storage capacity, some additional problems arise. You generally have to have add new disks that have the exact same capacity as those that are already in the device. If that SAN device is capable of growing, some of them are not, and you just have to purchase another SAN. And then after that, with the new storage disks that you put in there or the new SAN that you've brought on, you have to create new ones. You have to worry about zoning and masking. You have to configure RAID on it. There's a lot of manual configuration processes that take place that really make storage a big pain point for a lot of organizations when they're trying to be agile and trying to be flexible and really deliver services to their customers in a very cost-effective and time-effective way. And so one of the last things about traditional storage that is kind of tough to deal with and sometimes irritating for people is that you're investing a lot of money up front in a series of services that you're not going to fully use until it's time to replace those services or improve upon those services. And so with a traditional SAN environment, you pay, I think at the low end, some of the cheaper SANs I've seen are, at the $10,000 mark. You can go anywhere up to $500,000 or $1 million, but you're spending a lot of money up front for all this capacity and all this performance that you don't quite need yet. By the time you're fully using those services, it's time to upgrade them. And that, again, leads to another big upfront investment in services that you're not going to be fully using until it's time to improve upon them. And so really what we see is that as you continue to scale out your business to meet the demands that you have, it's difficult for traditional IT approaches to scale with what businesses require at this point. And so going through all of these processes consistently, it really leads to great levels of inefficiency, and it requires a lot of capital and operational expenditures. And really when you're talking about storage and having vendor-specific storage, it leads to a lot of special expertise that needs to be in place as well. Instead of being able to focus on what the business is doing, you have to focus on training and specific expertise just to keep the business afloat and up and running instead of being able to focus on innovation. And so those are some of the pain points that a lot of organizations have with traditional storage and really have brought rise to many different virtualization approaches. I actually forgot to finish building out my slide here while I was talking about scaling, but anyway. But these traditional storage pain points have really led to the advent of hyper-converged infrastructure services And then also more and more we're seeing people that are coming up with services we'll call a virtual storage appliance. And so in talking about our virtual SAN product, the first thing I am going to talk about is the fact that virtual SAN, it's not a virtual storage appliance. It's foundationally quite different in that a virtual storage appliance, you actually are setting up an appliance that's running in your virtualization environment, and then you're passing all of your I/O requests, whether that's read or write, through that virtual appliance, and it can then speak to your storage. In virtual SAN, what we've done is we have actually embedded it directly into the ESXi kernel. So it's directly embedded into vSphere, leading to a direct I/O path, just as we have with our virtualization platform in general. You now have the same for your storage devices that are, for your storage approach that's running on a VMware platform. And so really what we see is this removes a lot of management overheads when you're dealing with an appliance, and you don't have to unnecessarily consume resources. And so going from there to talk about more what virtual SAN actually is, it really is just as simple as saying it is a software-defined storage array. In vSAN, we leverage a combination of solid-state, so SSD, and spinning disks, so hard disk drives, that are installed in vSphere hosts locally. And with this software that we've embedded directly into the ESXi kernel, we then actually create a virtual SAN shared data store using that combination of solid-state and hard disk drives. This data store has incredibly high levels of performance because of the SSDs, or thanks to the SSDs, and you can scale out capacity as you need to with the hard disk drives. And then this data store, one of the other really nice things about it is that it is actually managed through your vSphere client that you're already using for your VMware environment. And you also are able to adopt really an approach of policy-based management, like we spoke about on the software-defined enterprise slide. But instead of having to do a whole bunch of coding and specific configuration and things like that, you're able to simply set policies for your virtual machines by which they're governed and by which virtual SAN will ensure that they are available, and that certain redundancy policies are in place for them as well. And so the bottom line here is that we actually have an extremely easy-to-use storage architecture. It doesn't require any LUN or RAID configuration, and you don't have to worry about any complex network topologies through connecting your host to an external storage device. All that you really have to worry about is enabling virtual SAN, which is very simple to do, and then setting policies to govern your virtual machines. And again, that's all done through the vSphere client. Continuing on from there, these policies are set, that I mentioned, these policies are actually set during VM creation, or for existing VMs, those that are already created, you can go back and actually set policies for them then. And I don't know if I am frozen up here at all. I'm trying to click through. Wait. I think it finally picked up. Okay. So sorry about that. I was just kind of frozen on a slide there. But really, as I mentioned, these storage policies are set at the time of VM creation, or for any existing virtual machines, you can go back and set policies for them as well. These policies are actually redundant by default. We have a policy that's called number of failures to tolerate. So instead of having to configure a RAID and going through all of those, really deciding what kind of RAID you're going to invest in, how you're going to configure it, you actually just say, hey, for this virtual machine or group of virtual machines, how many failures do I want it to be able to tolerate before, before that virtual machine would no longer be available. And so by default, it's 1, so every virtual machine will have a copy of it for redundancy purposes, and you can grow that up as needed as well for more mission-critical virtual machines. One of the other policies that you're going to be setting is really on the performance side. You'll set you can think of it as a first, second, and third tier, a gold, silver, and bronze tier of storage performance. So for more mission-critical virtual machines that need higher storage performance, you can actually ensure through those different policies that they have access to the storage resources that they need on both the performance and the capacity side. And then the last thing you can worry about as well is talking about striping. You can actually change the number of stripes a given virtual machine has when you're talking about where and how it is stored. And so through these policies, through the set of policies, you have virtual machines that are very redundant, they're highly available, and they're extremely easy to manage. And one of the nice things is that as your workloads are actually evolving, as virtual machines grow or have new requirements, virtual SAN, based on the policies you had previously set, will actually self-tune and automate, I guess, really the reprovisioning process for different storage policies. And it will tune the underlying infrastructure and adjust those policies as needed, as virtual machines evolve, as workloads evolve, and as requirements change. And then, one last thing as well is that all of these policies can actually be changed at any moment without having any any service interruption. And then the last thing I'll mention here is that really talking about the key benefits of virtual SAN. Starting on the left side here is that virtual SAN, it actually does install in just 2 clicks. You'll click a button that says Enable Virtual SAN, then another button that says OK. And once that is done, you can actually begin creating these storage policies and applying them to your virtual machines. So setting it up initially is extremely easy to do, and then after that, since everything is based on policy, it's very easy to maintain as well. And so for any customers, any of you out there who have vSphere 5.5 currently, you have access to virtual SAN. It's just a matter of purchasing the licensing for it and being allowed to actually install and implement it. As I've already mentioned, this is also managed from the vSphere client, and we have policy-based management. Virtual SAN is self-tuning and elastic, and it's extremely easy to scale as well. You can scale up by adding additional capacity and performance to a single host, or you can simply add new hosts for additional capacity and also additional performance. Coming on the high performance side, as we've mentioned, this is directly embedded into the vSphere, rather the ESXi kernel. And so it's already built in. You're not creating any additional levels of abstraction through which your I/O requests have to pass. You have a direct I/O model from virtual machine to its storage. And so performance is extremely high. It is flash accelerated through the solid state drives that you will have in each of your vSphere hosts. And just on the scale on the scale side of things, at this point we've been able to build a virtual SAN cluster up to 32 hosts. And out of that 32 host cluster, we actually were able to push about 2 million IOPS, and we had about 4.5 petabytes of actual storage capacity. And so at scale, virtual SAN can grow quite a bit to meet just about any demands that you would have within that 32 host limit. And one of the nice things too is that because of this model of not having to invest in an expensive storage device up front, you can actually you really experience a great price for performance, a breakdown or ratio that comes into play. And as mentioned, just on this area that says lower TCO, you do eliminate large upfront investments. You're able to grow as you go. So as you are getting to the end of your capacity that you have in virtual SAN, you can simply add additional disks to add capacity. Or if you need more performance, you can simply add additional solid-state drives to increase performance of your virtual SAN data store. And we have a very flexible choice of industry-standard hardware. We have a pretty extensive compatibility list for virtual SAN. And a lot of hardware vendors now are actually making what they call virtual SAN ready nodes, where you can purchase, all at once a server that is already ready and capable of delivering virtual SAN without having to go back and double check, compatibility for everything. And then the last thing I'll mention here, we mentioned that with traditional storage approaches, you need a lot of specialized skill. The bottom line here is that for you who already have a vSphere environment, who are comfortable running and managing that vSphere environment, you're actually ready as well to manage and run a virtual SAN environment in conjunction with that. So all the expertise, all the skill that you already have around vSphere, it absolutely applies to virtual SAN, and the two work very well together. And so just a couple of things to note for virtual SAN. There are some minimum requirements that have to be met. The first one is that you do have to have at least 3 vSphere hosts or ESXi hosts to run virtual SAN, and the main reason for that is just for redundancy and availability purposes. I actually have seen cases where you can have 2 hosts, but it doesn't work as well as if you have at least 3. All of these hosts are going to contribute storage space and also performance. And as I already mentioned, we have, sorry, I'm getting lost here. We have a requirement of having at least 1 solid-state drive and 1 hard disk drive in each of these hosts. And then respectively, you can have a ratio or relationship of 1 solid-state drive to 7 hard disk drives in what is called a specific disk group. And each, you can have up to 5 disk groups per host. So total, you can have up to 5 solid-state drives and 35 hard disk drives per vSphere host at its maximum scale currently. And so Again, for those requirements, at least 3 hosts and at least 1 solid state and at least 1 hard disk drive in each of those hosts. And at this point, we can grow up to 32 hosts. In our next release, we're actually working on upping that maximum, and that's going to be taking place in February or March of this next year. And we do recommend, just on the network side of it, that between your hosts you have at least a gigabit Ethernet connection, but we do recommend having 10 gigabit, as is the case with a lot of vSphere environments in general. And so with Virtual SAN, some of the key use cases that we see here is that it's really good for running a test and dev environment. Not necessarily production, but you can set it up and run it. You don't have to worry about, again, all this upfront CapEx, all this specialized skill for managing just a test dev environment. You can deploy Virtual SAN along with the vSphere licensing that you already have and fully support your test dev environment with very little management requirement. In the case of disaster recovery, another big one there, you have your primary site, Site A in this case, failing over to Site B. You don't have to completely mirror what you have at Site A. You can actually go a more cost-effective route and invest in Virtual SAN at Site B in that case, and it will fully run and support your business in disaster recovery scenarios. And then for those of you who are looking into VDI, so virtual desktop, Virtual SAN, the performance that you get out of it is very good for virtual desktops in general, in conjunction with our VMware View product, or rather our Horizon View product. And so it can be used in a lot of different cases, but these 3 here, so test and dev, disaster recovery, and VDI, are the 3 most popular use cases that we have at this time. And so going on, just some of the last things I wanted to bring up here is that we do have a pretty extensive list of existing customers who have invested in Virtual SAN in many different ways and actually have some pretty great results out of it. We have just a few listed here, and on this next slide, it's actually some quotes from some of these customers speaking about how Virtual SAN has improved upon their existing vSphere environment and actually improved upon what their I guess traditional or legacy approach to storage was. And so it is a great tool to use. We do have great performance out of it. It's extremely easy to set up and manage, and it's very cost-effective for, again, when you're looking at price for performance and also capacity. It's very easy to use, very easy to set up, and very easy to grow as you need to increase whether it's performance requirements or capacity requirements on the storage side. And yeah, that was all that I had. So I guess I'll turn it back to the guys at cStor.